If you couldn't tell by now, I love roller coasters, obviously. And something that us roller coaster enthusiasts do every year is we make a list of our top 25 roller coasters that we've ever experienced. And now that I have a total of 85 credits, I will be doing my second ever top 25 roller coasters video. Something that I'm going to start doing this year is in the corner, I will have something that says where the coasters ranked last year. And if you are wondering, yes, this is completely inspired by Airtime Thrills. But anyway, let's get right into the video. Starting out at number 25 is Gemini at Cedar Point. I really hope this coaster stays around for a while. It's like a supersized mine train with some really good airtime. My favorite moment being the final hill before the mid-course that has a big drop and a really good head chopper. And the jankiness really helps make it even better. Number 24 is Valravn, also at Cedar Point. I really don't understand why dive coasters get so much hate. They have some of the best drops ever, which is enough to give Valravn a top 25 spot. But it also has some other great elements like the sustained hang time 0G roll, which might even be my favorite element on the entire ride. And I also don't really mind the vests too much at all. And I actually prefer them to the older over-the-shoulder restraints like on Sheikah and Griffin. Next at the 23 spot, we have Great Bear at Hershey Park. I really love B&M inverts. I almost feel like it's impossible for any of them to be bad. And just the fact that Great Bear is my lowest ranked one shows you how good this model is. Something I really like about this one is that it's very unique. You have a helix before the drop, and the second half goes right up against Spring Creek. And the support structure also looks really cool because the park wasn't allowed to build any supports in the river, so they had to get pretty creative on where they could put them. At number 22 is the first new for 2024 credit in this list. It's Wooden Warrior at Quasi. And do not be fooled by its size of 32 feet because this is one of the most fun coasters out there. Even though it's not too fast actually, it still has a pretty good sense of speed because each element lifts you out of your seat very quickly and there's really no dead spots in between elements. My favorite moment is either the first drop or the drop out of the tunnel. And I think these Timberliner trains might have my favorite restraints ever. They are very comfortable and never come down at all further during the ride. At the number 21 spot is Manta at SeaWorld Orlando. That pretzel loop is very intense. For a good 4 to 5 seconds, you are being crushed by insanely intense positive Gs. It's a feeling that you really can't get on any other coaster besides the other flyers. And the intense pretzel loop really complements the rest of the ride, which is actually pretty graceful. But there are still some very good face choppers in the second half. Number 20 is Raptor at Cedar Point. Like I said earlier, I really like B&M inverts. This one is still smooth after 18 years of operation, and that was when I rode it back in 2022. But from what I hear, it's still very smooth. And it's also very intense, especially that double helix at the end. I don't usually gray out on too many coasters, but I definitely grayed out during that moment. And it has other moments too where you can really feel the positive Gs. At the number 19 spot, we have a roller coaster that moved up a lot on this list since last year, and it's Fahrenheit at Hershey Park. I thought about it, and I just realized that I was ranking it too low. I think it was like an expectations thing because I expected it to be top 3 in the park, but it wasn't. And now I can just appreciate the ejector moments and the good positive Gs at the bottom of the Norwegian loop. Number 18 is Montu at Busch Gardens Tampa. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, this is the most intense coaster I've ever ridden. Especially that Batwing. It shouldn't even be allowed for it to be this intense, but that's what I love about it. And after nearly 20 years, it's still perfectly smooth, which seems like you don't really get too much anymore with some of these newer B&Ms. But it's actually not my favorite B&M in the park. That would be Kumba on the other side of the park. It might not have quite the same intensity all the way through, but its standout moments are just as good, if not better than Montu's. And that Cobra roll is completely crazy, and just about as crazy as Montu's Batwing. Also, no one told me about the Raptor level gray out helix at the very end. But the real standout element is the crazy, and I mean the crazy 0G roll. The whip and airtime on this element is so insane, and there's no other 0G roll out there that gives a feeling really anything like this. And I've never understood how people can call it rough, because it's extremely smooth, especially for being over 30 years old. Just maybe keep your head forward before the 0G roll, not because it's rough, but because of the insane whip. And I really hope that the rumors about it closing after summer nights in 2025 aren't true, because I only got one ride on this amazing coaster, and I really want to get more rides on it next time I go there. At number 16 is the most underrated roller coaster in the entire world, and it's Predator at Six Flags Darien Lake, which has only gotten better this year after more Titan track was added to the two hills after the original Death Turn. And you completely fly through these two hills. They give borderline ejector airtime, and the entire coaster is smooth now, so no one can try to say it's too rough to enjoy. And those two hills also made the rest of the layout after it run a lot faster, to the point where now you even get laterals on the far turnaround, which the train used to completely crawl through. And you also get to feel the speed on the return run, which you couldn't at all before. This is one of my favorite wooden roller coasters, and I'm very happy to have it at my home park. Next, at the number 15 spot, we have Icebreaker at SeaWorld Orlando. This is not a family coaster at all. This coaster has so much ejector airtime, and it's almost RMC level, especially on the step up into the top hat. And I'm sure it's running even better now that they removed the comfort collars. But even back when they had them, it didn't disrupt the ride too much for me. Next at number 14 is Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England. And before you click off the video, I can explain. I know that some people love this roller coaster and say that it has one of the best layouts out there, and I can actually kind of agree with that. It's an out and back that turns into a twister, and then it has one more stretch of airtime hills. But there are a few problems, like the restraints. Unlike the Ride of Steel clones, this has more of a U-brick lap bar instead of a T-bar, and it's almost impossible not to get stapled with these, and it can really impact the airtime. Not to mention, the airtime isn't really anything that crazy anyway. It was just average to weak floater airtime, which is still really good, just not the insanely strong ejector airtime that I hear it has. Especially the Camelback before Superman cutouts. So I still really like it, just not quite as much as I expected to. But a coaster that does a similar thing, but I just kind of thought it did a little bit better, is Ride of Steel at Six Flags Darien Lake. You guys probably think I'm crazy for putting this above Superman the Ride, but this actually has strong ejector airtime. And even though it's not as fast as Superman, it has a much better sense of speed, and of course it also has much better lap bars that really allow you to feel free when you're getting airtime. And it's one of my favorite drops on any coasters. Between the speed, height, ejector airtime, and the fact that it's one of the only coaster moments where I still get a stomach dropping feeling. At number 12 is Canyumonium at Hershey Park. There are some really smooth coasters out there, like Premier Launch coasters and RMCs. But these new B&M Hypers are next level smooth. You literally feel like you are riding on a cloud, and B&M has completely mastered floater airtime, to the point that I prefer it to some ejector airtime moments. And that 5-second floater hill is where you really feel the airtime and just how good it is. Not to mention the Outer Bank wave turn thing after the helix. It kind of feels like weird, but also very cool for a B&M. Number 11 is Storm Runner, also at Hershey Park. And if this coaster didn't have that hydraulic launch, then it definitely wouldn't be as close to the top 10. And speaking of that launch, it's really good, especially in the front row. You really feel the speed, and you hit 72 miles per hour in just 2 seconds, which is very quick, and you feel it. But the rest of the layout is also really good, especially the drop off the top hat, which I feel like would be talked about way more if it wasn't for the amazing launch that comes right before it. Honestly, I think it's actually in my top 10 or even top 5 favorite drops on any coaster. And the flying snake dive is also crazy because of the whip, and the first roll feels so high off the ground. And starting out the top 10 is Millennium Force at Cedar Point. This coaster is very underrated, and it should be called Millennium Forceful, not Millennium Forceless, because it has so many sustained moments of positive G's. And it also has some extremely sustained and strong floater airtime moments that make you feel like you're on top of the world. And the speed you feel on some of these turns is unmatched by any other roller coaster I've ridden. And that drop is the most sustained moment that I've ever experienced. And it's also my favorite moment on any coaster in the entire park. Next up at the number 9 spot, we have Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. This coaster does everything that Candymonium does, just even better. The 5-second floater hill feels stronger, and there are more airtime moments added in that Candymonium doesn't have. And this next thing I'm about to say is also true about Candymonium, and it's that I really love the trim brake on the second hill. And no, I'm not even joking either, because especially in the back row, you almost feel like you come to like a complete stop and you just feel like you're floating in the air until not even a second later you get abruptly lifted out of your seat for some borderline ejector airtime. This element really surprised me for how good it was, especially it surprised me even more that I liked the trim brake. At number 8 is Boulder Dash at Lake Compounce. This is my favorite wooden roller coaster, and it's not really all that close. It feels pretty much out of control for the entire ride, and the fact that you're right up against the forest of trees and all these bushes that surround you, it just makes a sense of speed even better. And somehow, even though it's an out and back layout, it still manages to give laterals on almost every hill. You will get thrown around on this coaster, and there's nothing you can do to avoid it. But it's not rough, and the way Boulder Dash does it just makes it feel really cool. But just some advice, if you're sensitive to roughness or potholes, then don't ride in the back row whatever you do, because it jackhammers so bad there on some of the valleys in the first half. But as long as you ride towards the front in a non-wheel seat, you should be fine. You might still feel the 3 main potholes, just not as bad as you would in the very back row. Coming in at the number 7 spot is Maverick at Cedar Point. I actually find this coaster to be pretty underrated. It has one of my favorite first drops ever, and it's very hard to decide what my favorite element on it is, which shows how good all the elements are. Right now, I'm deciding between the crazy second launch and the ejector-filled second Stengel dive. Some other notable elements are the first camelback and the final speed hill. But Maverick gets overshadowed by Steel Vengeance all the time. Literally, I mean, Steel Vengeance is double the height and it's literally right next to Maverick. But if Maverick was at just about any other park, it would probably be the best coaster at that park, and that just shows you how good it is. And from one crazy Intamin coaster to another is Skyrush at Hershey Park taking the number 6 spot. And let me just start by saying that the old restraints did not bother me at all. Well, except for on the final hill, but besides that, they enhance the experience, and especially for the lateral moments, because you just get completely thrown to the side, and it's a very cool sensation. I'm kind of scared that the next time I ride it, I won't like it quite as much as before, because the new restraints, I've heard that they kind of make it more rattly, but no matter what, it'll always be a great coaster with some intense airtime and positive G's. And also, it has the craziest first drop in the world. And now it's time for the top 5, and starting it off is Wildcat's Revenge at Hershey Park. And it hurts to put it this low because it is one of the most out of control ejector airtime machines out there. But there are just 4 other coasters that I've been on that I like even better. This is another one of those roller coasters where it has so many amazing elements, and it's really hard to decide which ones are the best. For me, it's either the first camelback or the lateral double down, but that second wave turn cannot be slept on either. Hershey Park and RMC really knew what they were doing with this one. Finally, I actually got it right this year.
Hershey Park and Intamin knew what they were doing when they made this one.
Coming in at number 4 is Phantom's Revenge at Kennywood. You're probably used to strong ejector moments on coasters, causing them to have very restrictive restraints. Take RMC for an example. Personally, I don't mind the restraints, but I know there's some people that do. Well, Phantom's Revenge does have those airtime moments. It just has them with a pool noodle lap bar that's very loose. And this is just part of why Phantom's Revenge is my favorite roller coaster in Pennsylvania and my 4th favorite overall. Some people might say that the first half isn't great, but I can handle it when the second half is just that good. It's my favorite finale on any coaster ever. And the first half is still elite, just not as good as the finale. You have a 228-foot drop down a ravine where you feel like you are falling forever, and then you rip through a tight valley with crazy near misses at 85 miles per hour, and you feel so out of control. So really the only sequence that's not elite is the first drop into the ascent of the 228-foot ravine drop. But I really do feel like if it had more restrictive restraints, then I'd rank it a lot lower. But with these almost buzz bars, it's one of my favorite coasters ever. Now we are finally at the top 3, and just a little spoiler, all of these next 3 roller coasters are by the same manufacturer. Any guesses? Well, at the number 3 spot is Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England. Wow, why does this coaster not get talked about more? I've heard for a while that it's one of the weakest RMCs and slows down too much in the 3rd lap. But let me just say, this coaster has a better sense of speed than Superman in the same park. When I rode it this past summer, it was completely flying through the layout. And according to the Ride Forces app, it pulled almost -2 Gs. And I honestly completely believe that. Wicked Cyclone's airtime is no joke. And it's the kind of airtime that's so good that you feel like you're about to be split in half from how strong it is. It almost hurts, but in the best way possible. Probably the craziest moment was the outer bank under the first overbank. Getting that level of airtime but tilted 45 degrees on your side doesn't even feel like it should be legal. But I also can't not mention the hill after the first 0G roll because you completely fly over that hill. And you actually feel like you're going to be ejected from the train. You guys are probably going to think it's crazy that I put this above Wildcats Revenge, but I actually find these coasters to feel very similar. They both have that feeling of like they're going too fast, but Wicked Cyclone is just on a whole nother level. I went back and forth between this and Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point, and the fact that I have these coasters ranked so close to each other shows how much I love Wicked Cyclone. And I love it way more than the average person, because Steel Vengeance is widely known as one of, if not the best RMC in the world. And even though I don't think that's quite true, I still like this coaster a lot and think it's one of the best. The first half is one of the best out there with some huge sustained and strong ejector airtime moments, especially the top hat and the double up into the mid-course. One element in the first half that I wasn't really the biggest fan of is the outer bank. I mean, it's a great element, but it doesn't quite have the airtime that I expected. But even though it's weak floater, it's extremely sustained, so that makes up for it. The second half does get a little bit repetitive, which I don't mind too much, but it is nice to have some variety sometimes. Especially because it's mostly floater airtime. But all of that crazy airtime in the first half is the reason that it's my overall number 2 coaster. And now for the time you've all been waiting for, but you probably already know. At my number 1 spot, my favorite roller coaster that I've ever ridden is Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens, Tampa. I don't even know where to start with this one. It's an ejector airtime machine, and it has the craziest pacing on any roller coaster I've ever ridden. And it has some of my favorite elements on any coaster. Actually, it has my complete favorite element on any roller coaster, which is the wave turn over the station. You get aggressively thrown to the side, and you stay ejected out of your seat until the element is over. And I can't even explain just how much I love this element. The whip and the airtime together just makes the perfect element. And I also gotta say that the purple looks really good on an RMC. It's very purpley. Not to mention, it also has my favorite drop and my favorite inversion, which is the death roll. Starting out with the drop, you 100% feel the extra degree, and that's part of the reason why it's better than Steel Vengeance's drop. But I think it's also just something to do with the shaping and the profiling that makes you stay ejected out of your seat for so long. And for the death roll, you get whipped around 540 degrees so quickly, and once again, you are ejected out of your seat the entire way down. And just about every element on this coaster hits so hard and would be the best element on most other coasters. Like the final drop, Outer Bank, and 2 bunny hills before the final drop. I could go on and on about Iron Gwazi all day and how much I love it, but I think you get the point by now. This is it. 2024 is coming to an end, and these are my personal top 25 roller coasters. Tell me in the comments what your top 25 or even top 10 is, and if you enjoyed this video, then please like, comment, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next video.
Crack it.